Sandeep, nice to have you. Thank you for doing this.
Pleasure to be here, guys.
We've seen each other a couple times. A bit of history, a bit of backstory. You, me, and Steve have worked together.
Yes.
We were at Kareem together.
Yes.
What a fantastic experience. And today you are a co-founder and CEO of NorthLadder. Mabruk, by the way. I think that's an amazing venture. But before we get into that, I've always looked at your profile as something that's super, super interesting. Not something I've encountered personally, often. In a nutshell, you're a guy who was, a consultant at McKinsey, one of the most prestigious, I would say, firms in the world. Who then later joined forces with Emirates MBD to create a new venture, and then you got the startup bug and you came to Kareem, and today you're a co-founder of another venture. So I don't know why, but in my eyes, that's kind of like the inverse of how I thought my career would go. I would start with startups, I would figure stuff out, I would learn, and then I would have more stability and the corporate balanced life later, and you're going the other way around. So I think that's super interesting, and I'd love for you to kind of explain to us why those are the decisions that you took, and who you are, what your motivations are, and how you see the future of your own path.
Sure. Thanks, Chris and Steve, for having me over. So I just want to rewind a little bit before even McKinsey. I used to work with GE Capital, and there was an assignment back in GE Capital. I was based in India. Okay. There was an assignment to be able to go to the US and set up a consulting business for them. On the process consulting side, and I was the first guy who volunteered. I don't know why, but I just felt it as interesting, entrepreneurial, challenging, fun thing to do. New geography, never lived and worked in the US before I traveled on work. And that went really well, right? For 3 years, I had the most amazing time. I didn't have a boss who lived in the same city I did. He lived in New York, I lived in a different city, completely entrepreneurial venture. Yep. And then that was so much fun. Then, in consulting, I moved on to McKinsey, and McKinsey is also very entrepreneurial in that sense. Sure. So in a sense, I was already used to doing entrepreneurial stuff. And then when we were also doing a project in McKinsey for Emirates MBD of setting up a new entity, that also seemed super exciting at the whole strategy, and said, hey, strategy is not as fun as actually building it. So I jumped ship, right? Sure. But till then, that point in time, I'd done a lot of entrepreneurial stuff, but within the umbrella of a large organization. So there was some level of safety net in the background, enough capital in the bank. It was not like, starting something on your own completely.
Sure, there was flexibility, but there wasn't as much risk, let's say.
Absolutely.
And now
low
it's the
risk,
opposite.
Exactly. It was low risk, obviously limited upside,
sure,
but all the fun of building stuff on your own, right? Sure, you have to start from scratch, think about culture, think about how the organization should be built, all of that. So I realized, I think, over those years, and I had to even look back at my own corporate career, and I realized even in the corporate career, even with GE for 7 years that I was there, I didn't do conventional roles, right? So I would always volunteer for the riskiest assignment within that organization, different geography, different client, no one has ever done this before. And I realized, hey, I have that entrepreneurial bug in me, and then obviously by then, this was like 2010, 11. That's when the startup boom globally has happened after the last financial crisis. And then, I think a lot of people who were in the corporate world like me really felt they were missing out with all the tech disruption that was happening. Sure. I think it was happening right in front of your eyes. Yeah. But you're right. Once you're in the corporate world, you're in your comfort zone. Your exit barriers are higher. You don't want to kind of take the plunge. 100%. For me, it was a little easier. I mean, as I said, I first started with the safety net of large organizations, and then eventually I made the move. So question. So the entrepreneur bug was consistent throughout your career, but where do you think that comes from? Like, for me, being an entrepreneur and taking the risk or wanting to take those kind of leaps of faith are from, I think more kind of personal motivations inside me. So for me, it's more like a psychological kind of, accomplishment that I constantly need to run after. But for you, is it similar? Where does that bug come from, in your opinion? No, I think it's, you're absolutely right. It's, for most people that I know of, it's your approach to life and your purpose that drives it, right? For me, success at the end of my career is that, hey, did I try something that was out of the ordinary?
Yeah.
And even if there had a 5% chance of success, instead of, I had a predictable career, ended up as a VP or a senior VP in a large organization, retired. I mean, there's nothing right or wrong in that. It's just different motivations.
Absolutely.
And I've always been inspired. I think I'm intrinsically a risk taker. You need to have, and to be able to take risks, you need to have a little bit of fearlessness, not worry too much about the outcome.
Sure.
Because if you're going to overthink it, then you're going to take the safe bets, right? So I think it's a common trait amongst most entrepreneurs. You're always optimistic about the future more than the average person is, right?
Absolutely.
So I've always been that way.
Yeah, you said risk. I was going to say, for me, it's like a risk thing. Personally, I like taking risks. I'm a high risk person. I used to when I was younger, used to be a bit more addicted to having a bit of a gamble and punt on stuff. For me, that was it. I always wanted to push whatever that boundary was of being able to kind of do stuff. I think that's what drives. I certainly see that as what drives a lot of people.
It's a risk, and
and I think also there's a certain kind of comfort in change.
Yeah,
like I personally relate a lot to people who always want to try something new, right? It's not just the risk of the venture itself, it's also the constant change, the constant learning, the constant unknown, the constant. I think I get addicted to that.
You're 100% addicted to that.
And I know exactly where the mark is. As soon as I've done the same thing for more than 2 years and I get to the 3-year mark, that's when I start to lose interest. So either there's a new challenge within that existing, opportunity, or I just jump ship. Case in point, Karim, right? On my 3-year mark.
Man, I'm smiling now because DUCKLIFE is 3 years old. I'm like,
Kevin, I can't run away from this one. It's, but yeah, I think that's super, super interesting. I want to talk about NorthLadder a little bit. So it's a very interesting concept. I think it's number one. I think I applaud you on the approach, because from an enablement perspective, the approach that you guys are taking to kind of give more power to the consumer who believes in their kind of value rather than trying to access credit. It's incredible how we can kind of reposition things in our minds and make people understand that they are worth more than they already think that they have, and they can leverage their assets in a way that they haven't thought about it before. I think that's a brilliant concept. Could you take a couple minutes just to explain to us what NorthLadder is, how it works, what you're doing today, and what you might be kind of doing tomorrow?
Future. No, absolutely. So I was, a little bit after Karim, I was toying with different ideas, including starting something on my own. What intrigued me about NorthLadder was how big the opportunity of the whole second-hand market globally is, right? Intuitively, we all know it, right? Everything from a second-hand smartphone, to a car, to everything. I think there are some common traits in any second-hand asset. The first common trait is there's a lot of intransparency around the value of the asset, right? So when a brand new iPhone is a brand new iPhone anywhere in the world, but the minute it becomes pre-owned, then there's a lot of ambiguity of what the condition is and hence what the value is, right? So that's one. Second is, it's not easy to kind of deal with second-hand assets. There's a lot of friction involved in the whole process, and hence just the trading and the circulation of second-hand devices is nowhere compared to what it should be. Right? There's no question about the fact that in a lot of emerging countries in the world, people would love to get good quality pre-owned devices or assets, but just because of all these friction points, it doesn't happen, right? So I think that's the big problem that we're trying to solve. And I think what's unique is we've tried to combine a lot of knowledge from, literally from stock markets, from, our experience in technology, etc., to bring transparency into. So what we're doing today, we're focusing on electronics, but tomorrow, honestly, this can extend to Rolex watches, a Gucci handbag, and multiple use cases, right? So at the heart of it, what we're trying to do is to say that, hey, let's say you want to sell your phone. How do you do it? By addressing all these problems. So firstly, how do I get you transparency and say, what's your phone really worth? A second-hand phone, right? The only way you can do it is, we've taken the example of commodity markets. Before, just to give you some history, before gold was a commodity and diamond was a commodity and foreign exchange was a commodity, there was a lot of subjectivity in the value of these assets. Every dealer that you spoke to would give you a different price. And the only way customers got better value was that you commoditized it and started trading it in big numbers. So that's exactly what we've done. We've standardized the definition of a cell phone and said, hey, there are 4 levels. And then we've got hundreds of dealers to start bidding on those 4 levels. And the idea of standardization and then a competitive auction allows customers to realize the best price. We are not saying that we know the best price. We're saying let the market decide. That's the true marketplace definition. That's what we're trying to do. So we envisage a future someday when there are maybe 5,000 dealers across the world who are bidding for your phone. So you could be sitting in one corner of Dubai and get a price from some customer in some remote corner of Africa who wants your phone for the highest price.
Okay, so today as a product, just so I understand it, to make it clear, I want to sell you my iPhone 12 Pro.
Yeah.
I can go on NorthLadder, I can identify the product.
Yes.
And I'll take a few pictures of it. I'll kind of upload it. The platform will kind of put it in the tier that is relevant to it, or the categorization that is relevant. And then dynamically, the platform will kind of identify the value through supply and demand of that item with the relevant kind of marketplace, right?
Yeah, so it's a 3-sided marketplace, Chris. And you're the customer's one side, the buyer, who's the last mile dealer, is the second side. And the third side of the marketplace is a person who's assessing the phone, who's judging what the condition of the phone is, right? Okay. So he's the person in between who's trying to play a fair balance between the seller and the buyer. You see what I'm saying? So let's say you've got a phone, and this is a very real scenario in NorthLadder today. You're sitting in JLT, right? You have an iPhone 12 Pro. You want the convenience of selling this phone, and yet you want the best price. Okay, so let's say the best price comes from a dealer sitting in Abu Dhabi, who's on a platform bidding in an auction to win your phone, right? But you don't want to go to Abu Dhabi to sell your phone, right? So NorthLadder allows a courier person to come to your house or your office, pick up the phone, or we have now more than 50 locations in the UAE where you can drop off your phone. All of these people where you interact with will only assess the condition of your phone. If your phone is in excellent condition, they're going to pay you cash instantly. The phone will then be picked up in the evening by the courier and delivered to the Abu Dhabi dealer who won the highest bid, or the Fujairah dealer or the Dubai dealer. It doesn't matter. As far as you're concerned, for you, it is an easy interaction. You've got cash instantly. So we've got transparency, convenience, all of that in one platform, and you solve for it.
What I find interesting about it is there's 2 things. You're classing a phone as an asset. Right. So what's interesting about NorthLadder is you're in effect saying what I determine as an asset. You think of houses, you think of gold, you think of maybe a watch. Maybe a watch would be an asset, but to turn a smartphone or a mug or a handbag or something into an asset, I think that's super interesting. In terms of the kind of the like as a brand, the way that you're going to treat and like expand those assets, do you envision like taking that outside, like being able to not just go from Abu Dhabi to Dubai, but like further afield? Is that something that you're...
Absolutely, because the beauty of the products that we deal with, in fact, as a rule, we only deal with branded commodities. So we would not deal with custom-made furniture in the future, right? Yeah. But we would deal with a branded commodity like an Apple phone, or a Rolex watch in the future, right? Whatever it is, or a MacBook, right? The whole idea of that is that an iPhone is an iPhone anywhere in the world, right? Yeah, so absolutely to your point, I can tomorrow have a dealer sitting in South America or Africa bidding for your phone. And if the price is indeed higher than a Dubai dealer after incorporating import duties and logistics, so be it.
Why not? Yeah.
You as a customer is getting the best price. It's exactly what Amazon is doing on first-hand goods. They're getting you the sourcing products from anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Here is exactly the same.
Which from a consumer point of view gives you fair access to a product which you might be punished for depending on what your location is, purely based on your geography. Absolutely. So you're leveling the playing field on a marketplace in that sense.
Right. I mean, it's fascinating how big this market is globally, not just for smartphones, but for any second-hand product. Like there's just too much in transparency that you'll see a lot of tech. And the interesting thing is there is no other way to solve this other than technology. Right. There's no other way to solve this.
So I guess the natural existing competition today is more of a peer-to-peer marketplace, like the Dubizzles of the world and stuff like that. I mean, essentially, they're not the same experiences or products or promises or anything, but generally the ability to liquidate assets and seeing who competes against you would be those guys. Fundamentally, it's a different product, but in a way, you're in a category of your own, right?
Absolutely.
So how hard has it been to kind of position, communicate, and build the awareness and education for NorthLadder so far? How difficult or not has it been?
I think we are just beginning the journey. We have to be prudent in the early stages of the company. Building a consumer brand takes time, right? Takes time, takes capital. I think our approach has been, hey, let's go down the partnership route in the early stages, reduce the cost of acquisition, right? Build the business, and then slowly build a consumer brand. Because when you have sufficient capital, when you can this thing. So we keep getting this compliment from people that you're like a best kept secret, which is not a compliment from a marketing perspective because people just don't know about us. But it's something that we have to work on, right? So as far as right now, I think for people who hear about us and come to our website, they love the experience.
Sure.
Because very transparent. The price that you see on the website is actually what you get in reality. There are no surprises, etc. We want to keep it that way. But we have a long way to go in terms of building consumer awareness.
Is it just a website or is it an app as well?
It's just a website.
Are you going to make it turn into an app?
Yes, we will. We do have an app for dealers to be able to participate in the auction. But for customers, we're going to build an app. The need for an app is not as great as a high frequency use case, like a Amazon or a Noon or a Uber or a Careem, because you're not selling phones every day, right? Or laptops every day.
Sure. Now on that note, personal device or mobile kind of tenure is something that's always going down. People are changing their phones way more frequently.
Absolutely.
So the nature of the market might make it that most people will sell their phones within 16 to 24 months, right?
Absolutely.
And you're starting to see brands like Apple and Samsung provide trade-in services, right? So I can even go to the iPhone store and the Apple store and say, hey, here's my phone. I want the new iOS, Apple 13, whatever it is now. So you're also inherently competing against that type of service and offering as well, right?
So Chris, interesting you asked me that question because we sensed this opportunity 6 months back.
Yeah.
And we have such a good product market fit because our prices are so high. When you're trying to sell a phone, nobody offers a better price than us because of the auction platform we run.
Sure.
And when we discovered that, we went to every single retailer who offers trade-in services. And today, more than 70 to 80% of the trade-in volumes in the UAE happen through our platform. We offer trade-in services in more than 120 stores in the UAE already. With all the leading retail brands, be it any Samsung branded store that you see, be it all eMax stores, all Jumbo stores, many retailers use our trade-in services. So that's again, the value proposition is very compelling. Customers get a great value. They're able to upgrade to a device of their choice. And you're right, electronics, upgrading your device is the most intuitive thing to do because it's not like a fancy luxury watch that you can keep to pass it down. The other angle that makes it very interesting, one is people are upgrading devices much more. It's a much more consumer society now. The other thing is environmental concerns, and you're going to see this play out a lot more in the future. Mobile phones, not surprisingly, are one of the most, or even electronics, laptops, etc., some of the most polluting substances in the world. In fact, we've recently come up with a new slogan saying cash it before you thrash it, right? And the whole idea being that if you don't cash in your old device now, you're ultimately going to thrash it, and that's the worst thing you can do to the environment,
of course,
right? Because it ends up in landfills, and that's terrible, right? So if you actually sell your device on time, you'll not only get good money, but you'll also save the environment.
Absolutely
I've
true.
got like
I've got a drawer. I have a drawer full of phones. Yeah, I have a drawer full of phones since my.
And there's a lot of friction points that we're addressing, right? For example, a lot of people don't sell phones because there's data privacy issues, concerns, right? Like, hey, what happens to the data on my thing? Is it really safe if I do a factory reset? All of these we're solving one by one, right? We now have a tie-up with one of the leading data security software companies in the US. And that software is used by Apple, used by a lot of the leading global players. And we use the same software, right? So we can erase your data in a way that even the best hackers in the world cannot retrieve it. I mean, it's permanently erased, right, from the phone for a fee.
Apple advertise privacy now, right? Like, that's their leading slogan. So, but yeah.
And so, if we look forward, in terms of where NorthLadder is going to go, geographically, what are you looking at? Offering, what are you looking at?
Sure.
I mean, this is extendable to so many different kind of products and categories of products, etc. How do you see the future of NorthLadder kind of playing out?
That's a great question. Actually, I honestly can't predict because I would love to say that I know. So on one hand, the electronics market itself is so big, so compelling. One path could be, hey, we just dominate the electronics business in the regions that we do. It's probably $1 trillion market. Even if you kind of take the Middle East and the Africa section, that's substantial. The other thought could be, so there are a lot of adjacencies on this, right? So one, we can go down, say, electronics, people to be able to sell. Eventually they could buy, and becomes a trading platform when you create the transparency. The other thing could be, hey, you know what, because the way the technology is built, I can put any commodity out there. I can literally put a Rolex watch or a Gucci handbag and it'll work the same, right? It's the same logic, the way the tech is built, etc. Very scalable. Or I could also do what the business used to do till some time back, was financing of the asset, right? Something I really would to, because it's not so common in this part of the world. But if you go to the Western markets, this whole concept of asset-backed financing or pawnbroking is it's a very, very, very big industry. People don't talk about it, but it's just in the United States alone, there are 11,000 registered pawnbrokers who finance everything from a smartphone to a fancy handbag to a lawnmower. And that industry also finds applications in something that we do.
That was something I really liked when we first spoke. The idea.
I don't want to say that. That was a part of the offering that I thought was the most exciting.
Unlock equity of stuff sitting in your drawer.
Consumer perspective, from a come to market perspective, from a simplicity and focus offering, I can understand why you would focus first on this and not because it's a higher friction. There's so much more education. It's a longer cycle. But for me too, I think the most exciting part of the offering back then was really that, because although I have a huge respect for the buy now, pay laters of the world and the fintech solutions and the credit solutions that are starting to come out and the financial kind of services kind of expansion and boom that we're having, offering people credit
is huge.
Is on assets that they actually own is very different than just extending credit. On the basis of
there is some staggering facts on this. In 2019, almost 30 million Americans used services of pawnbrokers. 30 million. That's 10%. That's almost 10% of the population, right?
Wow.
Because what happens is a lot of people who are outside of the formal financial system, either because you're not credit worthy or you've had a recently bad credit experience because of which banks are not willing to lend to you, have no option but to borrow against their assets. And assets could be anything that you own, right? Traditional assets are gold and property and stuff like that, but a lot of non-traditional assets, all these. This is a very well understood concept in a lot of the Western markets. It's not a well understood concept in our market, which is why it will take education and awareness to build. So we might absolutely do it when we go to the West as an adjacency. But, as I said, this business is so beautiful. Once you start creating transparency on a second-hand asset, you can almost do anything, right?
But it is a stage. It is a staged education too, right?
Exactly.
It's like first you educate people on the fact that your assets
are worth something.
Exactly. And you can exchange them, right? You can
upgrade them,
you can cash them, etc. And then that starts the first education process. The second one is how you can leverage it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you extend it to different categories.
Especially in a world of like overconsumption, consumerism where we just say like news better, like so to change that behavior is a great thing anyway. But I definitely think on the unlocking capital or unlocking equity, I think the positioning of that, it has some taboo-ness. Like there's a taboo to it in the West, right? When you think of going to a pawnbroker. Yeah. Whereas here, if you actually completely rebrand that entire thing, unlock equity, and kind of what we're seeing in the world today, I guess over the next 5 years, markets are going to become more salient to the idea of equity, the idea of assets, the idea of investing.
Idea of value. Even if you think about not financing it, and the traditional trade-in, the brand new iPhone 13 has just been launched. I want to buy an iPhone 13, but what do I do with my iPhone 12 that I bought last year? Mm-hmm. Guess what? If I get 3,000 dirhams for my iPhone 12, that's a great deal, right? It's like almost getting 50% off the new phone that I'm buying. A lot of people don't know that it is so easy to get such great value. And that itself is value back to the customer, right? I mean, customers are so value conscious. You could have someone shopping around for 100 dirham price difference on different online shops. But here, sometimes you could be leaving 1,000 dirhams on the table and not knowing about it.
And people like me, you don't realize like it's a privilege to be able to operate in a first-hand market. There's a second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand market, and it's abundant with people and buyers on that side. So it makes total sense to contribute and like participate in such a system.
And there is such a stigma too, right? I think, and it's an unwarranted stigma most of the time, right? So it's funny how, I'm more kind of open to buying a secondhand luxury watch, let's say, but not a secondhand phone. Yeah. And essentially that's just because of the way the stigma has been created, right? And how those industries have been perceived, and the education and branding and positioning of each of those categories. So it's really interesting how that kind of.
But if you look at beyond like UAE is an example of obviously a country which is a high per capita income, etc.
Yeah.
But if you go to emerging countries, I mean, having access to a smartphone is not just about like their value of a smartphone is not our value. Our value is more entertainment, social, communication mode. For them, it is the way you do business, right? The way you access healthcare, the way you access like education. You know what I'm saying? Even basic needs. And so hence, I think the trend of people wanting to own smartphone devices, and obviously better than the saying, and a lot of markets they won't even have access to first-hand devices.
That's true.
The price point, even if you can afford it,
not
you
accessible,
can't, right? It's not accessible, right? So to that extent, making it accessible to people at a lower cost has huge positive implications, right?
Now, obviously it's a consumer brand. You're looking to speak to, men and women, individuals. But a part of me inevitably, like now that we're running DUCKLIFE and also our experience at Careem, I think there's a huge B2B opportunity too, because there's an immense. I remember, for example, at Careem, we had like hundreds of computers that were in and out based on rotating staff or whatever, and over time they depreciate or they get outdated, and you want to give. When a new joiner comes in, you want to give him a brand new one or an up-to-date one, not a 4-year-old MacBook Pro. You know what I mean? So it feels like that might be a huge opportunity well.
It's massive, and we are also working on that.
Okay.
As you can imagine, you're absolutely right? Most employers provide laptops at the very least to employees. Some people would also provide phones and tablets and other stuff. And the biggest, I faced the same problem when I was in a large organization, is that what do you do with these devices when people leave, right?
Yeah.
Or after 2 years when when everyone wants a new device, right? So they probably use it for 2 years or 3 years. What do you do with them?
Yeah.
And very often most organizations struggle with that because you don't get good value. You don't want to be dealing with, as a large corporate, you don't want to be dealing with the unorganized segment, right?
Exactly.
And negotiating for every transaction. So having a platform that allows you to get the best price and in a convenient way is significantly beneficial for them too.
Absolutely, I can only imagine. And then to think about the impact that it has on the second-hand and third-hand markets too, right?
Absolutely,
it's phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Access to these devices is everything.
Absolutely.
Okay, and in terms of geography and territory, where are you operating today? So today it's
UAE
the
and
UAE.
KSA. We've just last month set up operations in KSA. We're really excited to be in Saudi. It just you can sense the energy on the ground. The market is huge. one of the biggest smartphone penetration markets in the world, especially for Apple devices.
Sure.
So that's going to be a core focus, UAE and KSA, as far as consumer markets are concerned. And we will look at a much wider footprint as far as the dealer base is concerned.
Final question. NorthLadder is a brand, an organization that you co-founded with other founders, etc. And it is arguably another step towards deeper entrepreneurship in terms of what you've done, right? So every step has gone deeper and deeper and deeper into entrepreneurship and doing your own thing. I'd love to get your perspective on, what is the one thing that has surprised you the most versus everything you've done past in your career in terms of the complexity of the challenge, the size of the opportunity, whatever it is. What would you say has been the most surprising thing so far in the journey of NorthLadder versus, a Kareem, an Emirates MBD, and McKinsey, et cetera? What has been the biggest learning or surprise that you've had so far?
Yeah, I think, as I said, all the opportunities in the past, including Kareem, I had done it when we had sufficient capital available. And so my approach has always been, hey, hire a great team, get the best talent, and they will solve the best problems for you, right? I think when you're in a much earlier stage company, your ability to hire great talent is limited, right? To be honest, because you've got limited capital. And then, of course, there is a pool of great talent who want to work for a lot of equity and less cash. But then it's a very limited pool, right? So that has been, it is, I knew this would happen, but to experience it is a different thing. Of course, this challenge would have been 10 times more if I was starting something from scratch, absolutely.
Sure.
But I think that's been the biggest surprise. So I've taken for granted the capital that I had access to, and hence the talent that I had access to.
And I guess the related question to that is, do you think that is exacerbated by the fact that we live in a place like Dubai where the minimum kind of cost of living is a lot higher for most people, where the ability to entertain salaries that we can afford, let's say as a startup, is just not sufficient to attract a minimum viable lifestyle for the people that we're going after,
Yeah, absolutely. And also that's one factor for sure, Chris, but also, personally for me, as I said, I've been used to working with people in my team who had significant years of experience, brought a lot of this thing, and then suddenly realizing that, hey, that's not going to happen so quickly, at least not in the, and the numbers that I was used to before, was an interesting transition I had to kind of get adjusted to.
You have to wear multiple hats.
Yeah, roll up my sleeves a lot more, get a lot of stuff done myself, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I've always been very hands-on. But then, I realized that if you are not able to have a lot of senior talent early on, then your leverage is also limited, right? You're only able to do so much.
Absolutely.
So that's the...
Hence the focus.
Hence the limited resources, the focus. Do one thing really, really well, get more capital, start doing more things.
We can relate to this conversation of focus, can't we? Yeah. I'm like, Chris, focus. Let's hone in.
I think, it's capital and it's talent, and it's all connected to each other. Yeah. It's focus.
Well, Sandeep, thank you so much for coming out. Again, super excited to see how your journey will continue to evolve. Big fan, and I hope to have you again on the podcast in a couple of years. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve, for having me over. Thank you.